While Comey is imploding and McCabe is imploding and the prior senior corrupt management at the FBI is all imploding, the other chunk of this that will need to be addressed, of course, is the intelligence side. And then when that's addressed, it leads right into the Oval Office. It takes time. If the Democrats take the House or the Senate, it's going to be much more difficult. But the fact of the matter is, slowly but surely, I believe we're going to get to the bottom of this. The outline that I gave before we knew much was pretty accurate. I've got a little bit more when we return. Now, we know the president knew about the dossier because shortly before he left office, there was a big meeting in his office about it. With Sally Yates, the acting attorney general and a leftist, with Susan Rice, who wrote the after-the-fact email to the record. The president said, do it by the book, which means he didn't. Comey was in the meeting, and others were in the meeting as they were conspiring. You see, the Hillary Clinton campaign and the Democrat National Committee paid for this dossier. The Russians participated in the information in the dossier. They put information in the dossier that was intended to effect the election and assist Hillary Clinton. The Clinton campaign and the DNC tried to launder the money through a law firm and a lawyer, and then through Fusion GPS, and then to an ex-foreign agent, British agent, in order to conceal their role in it and violate campaign finance laws. That dossier wound up in the hands of the CIA director, Brennan, who's one of the most radical, partisan CIA directors I've ever heard of or seen in my life. And, of course, he voted for a communist when he was in college. He could never get clearance today, I wouldn't think. So the CIA director had it, and he was very anxious to get it out. And he had a meeting with Harry Reid, where he shared information from the dossier. And Harry Reid wrote an infamous letter, as the New York Times reported at the time, to Comey, saying, hey, you got to investigate this Russian connection. Brennan was pressing Comey. Meanwhile, Comey really didn't need to be pressed, because over at the highest levels of the FBI, the knives were out for Trump. Candidate Trump, transition Trump, President Trump. Comey didn't want Trump. His family, now we know, is filled with liberal Democrats. McCabe didn't want Trump. We know all about his family and so forth. And others. Stroke, the head of counterintelligence, his girlfriend, the general counsel, Page, and it goes on and on. So the senior levels of the FBI were in the Obama camp. They didn't need to be prodded by Harry Reid or the CIA director. Hell, they were thinking about hiring Christopher Steele, who wrote the dossier. They didn't need pressing at all. They turned around and used that information to get a FISA warrant, except they never told the judge that it was nothing more than paid-for opposition research by the Clinton campaign and the Democrat National Committee. So the intelligence services, led by Brennan and James Clapper, who also wanted the dossier out in the public, the National Intelligence Director, the CIA Director, the FBI Director, the Deputy FBI Director, all used the dossier paid for by the Clinton campaign and the DNC. Stick with me. I'm making it as simple and putting it as plain English as I know how. And then they have a meeting in the White House over it. What are they going to tell Trump about the dossier? What are they going to tell Trump? I commented on this 6 days ago when Comey clips were coming out with his first interview with Democrat Clinton War Room former aide George Stephanopoulos on ABC. Stick with me each point, and you'll understand this completely. Let's go ahead and play that, Mr. Producer. I'm not familiar with the number here. I'm looking for it, but let's see. Do you have it? Cut 5, go.
You're sitting here briefing the incoming president of the United States about prostitutes in Moscow.
Well, why did you do it? He didn't ask you to do it. It was a setup by the Clinton
stop.
camp. You've been hearing this word setup all day today. We, here on the Levin Show, we always knew this was a setup. We always knew this was a setup. We've talked about it multiple times. That he goes in there, he doesn't give the entire dossier to the president. He doesn't tell the president, we now learn through this interview, who funded it. But he goes to the most scurrilous accusations in there. Not just a setup to try and get the president to overreach and quote-unquote obstruct justice, but blackmail. But blackmail. To set up a blackmail situation where Comey is trying to let the president know, look what we have on you. Notice he doesn't say who funded it. He doesn't say we know this with certainty. He just dangles it out there. And he knows it's upsetting the president. Because it's scurrilous. It would upset anybody. So he keeps it hanging out there. He knows it's a lie. He knows who paid for that. But he doesn't tell the president either. He just says, look what we have. Cleared the room for added drama. Should have given the president the entire dossier and told him who funded it. But he couldn't. Do you know why? Because it was used for the FISA warrant. He couldn't tell the president what they didn't tell a federal judge. And they wanted the president to lash out. They wanted the president to do something. They wanted the president, Comey did, to quote-unquote obstruct justice. And yet, that's not what he did. He said, if anybody in my orbit, paraphrasing, is involved in any kind of collusion or interference, let's find out who it is, even if it's a close satellite to me. The president did the stand-up thing, the principled thing. He didn't interfere at all. Go ahead. ENC and the wash-through that law firm, and then Fusion GPS, Christopher Steele onto the Russians. Trump is the victim here. You're going in there, you're giving him the most salacious stuff that's in the dossier, and then you're mocking him for his response. Oh, it was surreal, you know. I was floating above it, floating above myself, looking down, saying, you're briefing the incoming president of the United States about prostitutes in Moscow? You idiot. Go ahead.
January 27th. At a private dinner in the White House, President Trump raises the issue again.
Says he may want me to investigate it to prove that it didn't happen. And then he says something that distracted me, because he said, you know, if there's even a 1% chance my wife thinks that's true, that's terrible.
Now he wants him to investigate it because he knows it's BS. And he still doesn't know, the president of the United States, now it's January 27th, where this came from. Comey knows where it came from. And so you're the president of the United States now. Weeks have passed. This still is bothering you that these allegations were made, brought to you by the FBI director. You said, you need to investigate that and find out what the hell's going on. If there's a 1% chance my wife thinks that's true, it's terrible. And he finds, again, Trump's comments outrageous. Go ahead.
And I remember thinking, how could your wife think there's a 1% chance you were with prostitutes peeing on each other?
I don't know, pal, but you seem to refuse to dismiss it. Go ahead.
I'm a flawed human being, but there's literally zero chance that my wife would think that was true. So what kind of marriage?
Yeah, well, a lot of us might think it's true.
There's only a 99% chance you didn't do that. And I said to him, sir, when he started talking about it, I may order you to investigate that. I said, sir, that's up to you, but you want to be careful about that because it might create a narrative that we're investigating you personally. And
now, stop, please. I'm live here. So you see how they box in Trump, and he's getting frustrated. It's a lie. It's paid for by the Clinton campaign and the DNC. He never reveals that to the president because the president's reaction would be quite different, wouldn't it? His reaction would be, you better investigate that campaign and those people and find out how the hell this wound up at the FBI. But Comey couldn't, because Comey was part of the conspiracy. Comey was doing the work of the DNC and so forth and so on. So he couldn't very well say, look, you know who paid for this? Not only did the Clinton campaign and the DNC pay for this, he couldn't say that, but we used it to get a warrant. How do you like that? And we're the source of the leaks. How do you like that? We in the CIA. Go ahead.
Very difficult to prove something didn't happen.
So put yourself in Trump's position. What's he supposed to do? He's saying, investigate this. It's dishonest. It's not true. Oh, well, you know, if we investigate this, people will think we're investigating you. So here you have this noxious allegation that is sitting there, that Comey brought to the president-elect. It's still sitting there when he's president of the United States. And he wants it addressed because he's being wronged by somebody. And let me stop now. That's enough. I'm here live. Funded by the Clinton campaign, funded by the DNC, with Russian input, pushed by the CIA director, pushed by the director of national intelligence, pushed by the FBI director, pushed by the deputy director of the FBI. By the way, pushed by the Attorney General of the United States, the Deputy Attorney General of the United States. All of them have to sign off on FISA warrants. Pushed into the media. I mean, after all, Fusion GPS is owned and run by former reporters for the Wall Street Journal, using their connections to get the information out. Brennan using his connections to get information out, including Harry Reid. We know that they're leakers at the top of the FBI. We don't know exactly everything they've leaked, ladies and gentlemen. We know a little bit. Guess where they've been caught? Comey pushes his memos out, leaks them. Because he wants a special counsel to get Trump. There's no criminal basis to get Trump. Trump is the victim. Trump is the target of the espionage. He's the target of these bad cops, as I keep calling them. And yet, there's a special counsel appointed to investigate Trump. Now, as we've discussed here at some length, starting over a year ago, this has been a setup since day one. A setup since day one. That's the word I've used. That's the word I'll continue to use. Since day one. And we know the whole story related to not the entire setup, but the dossier. Now look how they sat on these Comey memos for months and months and months, withheld them from members of Congress. Why? They could have redacted the classified information that Comey leaked illegally earlier. Why did they withhold these memos for all this time? They withheld the memos all this time because they support the president. They support the president. The New York Times and the Washington Post and others have done their best to twist these memos into something. They're nothing. There's no collusion in there. There's no obstruction in there. There's no conspiracy in there. There's nothing. There's the opposite. He wants to get to the bottom of it. He wants to get to the bottom of this prostitute stuff. He wants to get to the bottom of any collusion that they keep throwing around at him. Says, get to the bottom of it. Find out what the hell's going on. That's what he's saying. This has been a setup from day one, and they're not done.